Hello everybody, Andrew Field here, and I know that it's been a long time since my last video, and there's been a lot of news to cover, so I'm going to get right into it. First off, Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich and Ukrainian peace negotiators suffered symptoms of suspected poisoning. So if you were not sure where Russia stands with negotiating for peace, there you have it. Russia is not at all looking for peace. They're looking to at least gain ground and try and come out with something. Um, yes. Germany outlaws displaying the letter Z, which has been a symbol of supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. Peace talks have failed between Russia and Ukraine and have no longer continued. Biden ordered the release of 1 million barrels per day. This was a while back. Just wanted to mention it as a strategy he was trying to utilize to lower gas prices. Ukraine attacked a Russian fuel depot, and Russia tried to make a big deal out of it, and the U.S. stood strong, saying that Putin was the only aggressor with the Russia and Ukraine war. Russia drastically changed its strategy, the reason being that their original strategy was to move right into Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, and try to take over the city, which is actually a major city, and try to take it over and just win over Ukraine right away. But since that hasn't worked, and the people of Ukraine have fought valiantly in protecting Kiev, especially all over Ukraine, but especially in Kiev to stop Russia from taking over Kiev, they have since moved their troops away from Kiev and Chernihiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, and they now are attacking central and eastern Ukraine. It seems like they're attacking smaller cities that don't have as much population, and they seem to want Russia's strategy seems to be to gain ground from eastern cities. It seems like a lot of it's from eastern cities, and try and gain ground so then if they no longer want to continue the war because of the international condemnation and international sanctions, they can just claim that they now control part of eastern Ukraine and gain some territory, and then the war will end. That's what it seems to be, if they cannot win the war in a short matter of time. We'll have to see with that. When the Russian soldiers moved out of the major cities of Ukraine, and moved their troops back. Unfortunately, it seems that Russia has committed many war crimes. Um, and I saw that people were talking about previous engagements that the U.S. in the past has committed war crimes in different events. And though this is probably true, I think it's important that we properly address the severity of these actions. Um, I think that Russia needs to be tried. I think President Putin needs to be tried. I think there needs to be more than condemnation for this, because we have these rules for a reason, right? Even in war, there are certain things that go too far. And that may be crazy to see for some people because war is a lot of death and a lot of chaos, but um, some things just go too far, even for war. So, President Zelensky accused Russia of committing genocide, attempting to eliminate all of Ukraine. Um, some of the things that they found were mass graves, executed civilians near Kiev. There were a lot of pictures that were released to the press. I think Bucha. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly, but I believe that is the city where, a lot of war crimes were committed. Apparently, with the photos as evidence. President Biden called Putin a war criminal and that he should be put under trial. He said more sanctions on Russia were coming. UK said alleged attacks on civilians must be investigated as war crimes. The US and the European Union vowed to assist Ukrainian authorities, which I think was a good step, with investigations and evidence. Um, Pretty recently, Russia struck a Ukrainian train station, which seemed to be, it reportedly was mainly for moving civilians out that were becoming refugees trying to flee the country. 50 people, the latest report I saw, where that 50 people were killed, 98 were wounded. I would call that a war crime. When you're fighting in a war, you should be only targeting military targets, especially a sophisticated country with a sophisticated military like Russia. I don't think things like this should be allowed to attack a train station full of civilians. I mean, that's just ridiculous. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson traveled to Kiev for a secret meeting with Zelensky. Now, I haven't liked Boris Johnson that much, to be honest. He definitely was out there when he first got elected. He suffered a bad battle with COVID 19, if you don't remember. And England was the first or the last country to put in COVID-19 restrictions, and was also the first major country um, to end COVID-19 restrictions. So they didn't have it on as long as other countries. I don't think England handled COVID very well. Now, I know that's not a lot to say because the US handled COVID very badly, but that was under the Trump administration, and we all know how horrible he was. So, I didn't really like him that much, but I give him massive respect. As a world leader, to go down to Kiev and meet with President Zelensky, that's just a lot of respect is earned for that. And that just sent a great message against Russia, so loved it. The White House was worried that France may elect Marine Le Pen, a Putin sympathizer. Early polls were showing a close race, so I was pretty nervous about it as well. Thankfully, though, today France had their presidential election, and Emmanuel Macron defeated Marine Le Pen, who was against not only a Putin sympathizer, but was against the EU and NATO. And apparently the United States, to just add on to it. So democracy definitely won today. I think the margins were pretty close, but were not as close as the early polling suggested. Emmanuel Macron won with 58% of the vote, and Marine Le Pen, who has since conceded, won 41%. So pretty narrow margins, but not as bad as early polls were showing. But even though democracy definitely won today, and it was very important, because if the Western Alliance between, I mean, it's worldwide, this alliance against Russia, but it's mainly between Western Europe and the United States. And yeah, it would have been a major blow for a Putin sympathizer to win an office in France and do a lot to dismantle the Western alliance. So it was very good that Russia got another loss and democracy had another victory with an extreme right candidate being taken down. But I think it just shows how dangerous this trend is of extreme right candidates. We've seen this in many countries around the world, but for a major democratic country like France to have an extreme right candidate who is very clear on her stances, win 41% of the vote, and be the candidate to run against Macron, I think is a very dangerous thing that we all need to be taken seriously about. We need to take very much care in this, and I think that it's worrying because one of these days, if this trend continues, a major country is going to have an extremist leader. So that's what I worry about, but thankfully that did not happen today. Macron, in winning, has another 5 years as the leader of France, and also he was the first French president to be re-elected since 2002. So that's 20 years ago. So that's a big deal. Russia threatened to place nukes in the Baltic region if Finland and Sweden joined NATO. They're very adamant against anyone joining NATO, and the funny thing is, since they started the war in Ukraine, NATO actually not only has grown stronger in its alliance between all the members, but may actually gain several members. So that's just a kick right in the nuts to Russia, and that's just lovely. The presidents of the Baltic regions and Poland, soon after Russia's threat, visited Ukraine to show support. Russia hit, Ukraine hit Russia's Black Sea flagship ship, the largest ship in its fleet, in a missile attack. Apparently, Russia tried to claim it was just some fire, but I believe Ukraine that they attacked their flagship, their main vessel, and apparently sunk the ship. So that's just such an amazing feat for Ukraine to take down the biggest ship Russia has. That was just that's just a great sign for the war that Ukraine now, with the Western weapons being shipped to Ukraine from many Western nations, Ukraine is now standing a good chance at being able to hold back Russia. Um, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin III are visiting Zelensky in Kiev actually right now. Um, to be honest, I was a little disappointed. I know that people would say it'd be too risky, but after Boris Johnson safely got to and from Kiev, I know it's a war zone. I know that it's very difficult right now, but especially since Russia has altered its forces to that are not no longer in Kiev, I would have wanted Joe Biden to visit Zelensky in Kiev. I think it's really important to show, and we have, but I think it's important to show just how strong our relationship should be with Ukraine right now. And I honestly would have wanted Joe Biden to go to Kiev. I think if I were president, I would have gone to Kiev. So I do think that's not as great with President Biden. But I do really appreciate that even though he is not going to visit in Kiev, the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin III are visiting Zelensky to show our support. I think that's a good sign. I think I may have reported this before, but I saw more reports about it, so that means it's still going on. Declassified U.S. intelligence shows that Russian soldiers are continuing to not fight and sabotage equipment, and also that Putin felt misled by Russian generals who kept crucial details from him, not wanting to anger him. Now, with the Russian soldiers, Russia is doing a massive disinformation campaign on the TV channels that they control, the newspaper, everything. They're trying to make sure that Russia believes whatever falsehoods they give them to think that the war is justified. Because, of course, they're an authoritarian country. They are definitely not a democracy, although they try to claim to be. So that's a really good sign that the Russian soldiers know that this war is a farce and that they're sabotaging equipment and refusing to fight because they're going to die for literally nothing. I mean, there's nothing to gain from this. Even if they gain territory, it's not even worth it because there's no reason to attack Ukraine. Ukraine did nothing to provoke this war. Um, so, yeah. Shanghai locked down each half of the city for mass COVID-19 testing after there was an outbreak in cases. The FDA authorized second booster shot of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines for everyone 50 and older, and some who are immunocompromised. Yes, the federal mask mandate has been ended on public transportation because a federal judge brought the mask mandate down. Federal officials did want to extend this to May 3rd, and honestly, I I agree with the argument that I think a federal judge holds too much power to be able to end that mask mandate, that federal mask mandate that now I think the Biden administration is trying to fight in the courts, but even if they were able to overrule it, it would take a lot of time and effort, and I think the way that the public consensus is right now, I don't believe that the Biden administration will be able to get it overruled. Um, but I think that a federal judge has too much power to overrule something like that, especially in a crisis. But I think that the mask mandate needed to end. I think there was no reason for it, especially after the CDC guidance that masks were no longer needed in many parts of the country. So I think it was time it should have ended, but I think it's sad that it ended by a federal judge. It is in their power, but I think in terms of crisis, it would have been better for the Biden administration to take the ruling down. Biden announced a billionaire minimum income tax. It doesn't seem like it's going to be able to pass because it's probably going to be seen as too progressive, and the Senate is deadlocked right now. But I personally really like it. It's a new budget plan, tax on households over 100 million, aims to make the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share. Obama, a while back, came to visit the White House, first time since leaving the presidency. Excuse me. And this was a while back, and I apologize for not reporting this sooner. That Ketanji Brown Jackson, the hearings went on, and she was appointed to the Supreme Court, the first black woman justice in U.S. history, which is a major achievement. I don't really like where she stands with the LGBT community, but I think it is important that this barrier of never having a black woman justice in our history needed to be broken, so I think it was a good move. Trump likely committed felony obstruction, a federal judge ruled. White House records on January 6th were turned over to the House, show a gap in President Trump's phone logs of 7 hours 37 minutes, which seems to be a tampering of evidence to have that much time removed. And also, I almost forgot about this, but Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, that disgusting representative that we have in Congress currently, may not be able to run for re-election because the January 6th committee is investigating her in, obviously, in accordance with what happened with the insurrection. And yeah, she was tried. There was a hearing that recently happened, and I would love to see her barred from re-entering Congress because there is a rule for that, and I would love it. There should be more members involved, like Representative Mo Brooks, and Josh Hawley, and House Member McCarthy. The audio that recently came out, where he keeps flip-flopping and saying he was for Trump, against Trump. I don't know. It seems kind of corrupt as well, because he knows that what Trump did was wrong and that he bears responsibility, and then he's trying to cover it up soon after it happened. So, we'll see what happens, though. As long as Marjorie Taylor Greene gets removed from Congress, or whatever, is not able to run again after this new election term, that would be wonderful. Recently, CBS hired Mick Mulvaney, Trump's former chief of staff, which I think is horrible. Chris Wallace revealed why he left Fox News, said that at Fox it became unstable or unsustainable when people questioned the truth. Most people figured that way, but it's good news. There was a shooting in New York. The suspect was later arrested. Elon Musk, who I can't stand, paid $3 billion to own 9% of Twitter shares. I think there was a group that bought more shares to own more than him, so I don't think he owns the of most section of Twitter, but he owns a lot still. And yeah, I guess we'll get to that later. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill limiting classroom discussion of LGBT issues. That was signed into law. I agree with it. I think that a lot of bills Florida passed have been too far right, but I think it doesn't make sense that LGBT should be discussed in the classroom. I think that's just too far, especially to young kids. People can decide that on their own when they're adults. So I agree with the bill, as controversial as it is. Biden signed the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. Took over 100 years to get passed. Then there was the whole Oscar news that happened. I I don't want to go into it too much because I know it happened a long time ago, but Chris Rock made a mistake of making a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Smith, about her a condition she has that makes her bald, which I think went too far. But Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on live television, which was stupid, especially since someone apparently slept with his wife and he didn't act that way. But Chris Rock chose not to file a police report, and unfortunately, that's what took the spotlight over the Oscars. When there was a lot of great things that happened during the Oscars, like Samuel L. Jackson apparently receiving his first Oscar, which I was like, what? He's had such a long, great career as an actor, and just like Leonardo DiCaprio, Samuel L. Jackson just received his first Oscar recently. It's just wild to me. Um, and Will Smith also won Best Actor for King Richard, which is a great movie. 6 people died, 9 were injured in a Sacramento shooting. The suspect has been arrested. Something that's been pretty crazy is that CNN Plus shut down weeks after launch, which is a huge disaster. Amazon workers made a big deal in New York pretty recently when they voted to unionize for the first time in the company's history. Christopher Smalls, the president of the Amazon labor union, was fired from Amazon in 2020 after helping organize a strike demanding better health and safety protections during COVID. Just wanted to shout out the company Epic Games, who created Fortnite. They raised $141 million in humanitarian funds for Ukraine for like a month, saying that all money they receive would go to that. So that's really awesome. Um, yeah. And speaking of the douchebag Elon Musk, and honestly, it sucks because he created Tesla, and I think he kind of pioneered this whole push for electric cars. So, want to like the guy, but when he does stupid stuff like this, I can't stand him. He offered to buy Twitter for $41 billion. Okay, and this is why I say that the richest people have way too much money. This guy just on a random day decided, you know what, I don't like the way Twitter is run, so I'm going to offer to buy the company for $41 billion. Like, who in their right mind would, do that? Like, just give control to this guy. $41 billion he's just willing to throw out. And if I become president one day, I am imposing a heavy tax on the top 1%. I'll tell you that right now. Taylor Swift received a doctorate in fine arts from NYU. That's such an amazing job. I mean, she's an ultra famous singer and celebrity, and obviously didn't need to, but to receive a doctorate on top of that, it's just really great. So that's all the news I have for you today. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Take care.